Welcome to this week's Eccentric Minute, brought to you by Eccentric. This week's Eccentric Minute is one of my favorite exercises to do with the K-pulley, and that is the pull-through. Guys, once you've figured out about how far you need to walk out with the K-pulley, grab whatever attachment you're using for the pulley, walk yourself out there, and really push your hips back at the K-pulley. From there, when you hit that stretch, really punch your hips forward, keep your chest up, and try to extend your knees and your hips all the way through. And this is where one of the major benefits of using a flywheel kicks in, as it pulls you into a deeper stretch as you push your hips back into your hamstrings and your hip extensors, so that you really open it up and stretch everything out in the back. This is an exercise that I'm sure your athletes are going to love to hate, but reap awesome rewards from. I really hope you enjoyed this week's Eccentric Minute. Make sure you check them out at eccentric.com to find out everything you need about the K-box and the K-pulley. Being a strength and conditioning professional requires constant pursuit of better knowledge, better methods, and better means. But what if there was a place where strength and conditioning coaches could learn from some of the most innovative practitioners in the world, such as Jeff Moyer, Lachlan Wilmot, William Wayland, James the Thinker Smith, and Kierwenham Flatt? Well, you could find multiple lectures from each of these top-level coaches and a few lectures and examples from yours truly as well, all in the Strength Coach Network. The Strength Coach Network is going to bring you well over 100 different lectures from some of the top practitioners in the world to be your one-stop shop for your continuing education and professional development. So hop on over to strengthcoachnetwork.com/CVASP today and get your 48-hour trial for only $1. That's strengthcoachnetwork.com/CVASPS to get your 48-hour trial for only $1. I look forward to seeing you in the Strength Coach Network. Hello, and welcome to the podcast. Today, guys, we have an absolutely awesome talk. We are going to be discussing the training of pro golfers with William Wayland. After a real quick rundown of how he got into golf and the European Tour, William's going to start to share with us what his role is with the tour and some of the pros and cons and limitations that he has with it. Next, he's going to dive right into how they select the what's, whys, and hows and of the programming for these people on the tour, and really how this traffic light system they have has been super effective to help them continue to develop the players. He then shares with us, what he's seeing and what has had the largest impact on improving measurables like club speed and ball velocity, and including where there actually may be some limitations and how they are determining how strong is actually strong enough. And then he finishes off sharing with us some of the cultural shift that he's seeing occurring in golf when it comes to training, and how the role of education, not just with the players, but the coaches, has really been instrumental in that. This is really an awesome talk, guys. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Let's get right to it. William, thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
It's really good to be here, Jay. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. Listen, I'm stoked for this because we don't do a lot of talk when it comes to specific sports, and this is going to be an interesting little niche that you work in the sporting world. But for the 1.5 person listening to this who doesn't know who you are, let's let them know where you're at and how you got there, brother.
Yeah, so obviously William Wayland, and I work in a small private gym in Chelmsford, in Essex. We run a lot of S&C out of there, but my main consultancy work that I do right now is with the European Tour Performance Institute, and that has me traveling all over Europe, sometimes the Middle East, working with Challenge Tour, European Tour, and Seniors Tour athletes. So most of my work right now surrounds working with professional golfers, although I'm known for some work in Superbike, and also prior to that, I used to do a lot of work in combat sports, particularly MMA. But right now, I'm very much in a golf bubble and quite enjoying working with professional golfers.
Yes, because there's nothing that screams immediate transfer more than going from MMA to golf.
Yeah, it's a lot of people they don't see the parallels between the two, but basically I've said it this way, and I've said it when people ask me to go speak. It's always If you've got athletes who run, I'm no good to you. But if you've got someone who wants to either hit someone in the head or hit something small with a stick, I'm probably pretty useful in that situation. So yeah, it's something of a specialism, getting people to produce a lot of force and power from kind of a static start, particularly if they want to strike something.
I
And
love
yeah,
that.
that's kind of where I am. But like I did a talk the other week with Sam Portland, and he was there to talk about sprinting and speed, and I was like, I can't help you there. I'm no good with that stuff, but the striking stuff I can definitely help with.
I love that. When it hits somebody in the face or hit a small object with a stick, I love it. But man, you have and you've developed a really really great reputation when it comes to the sport of golf along with the European tour. So I really want to talk about that. I want to talk about where this direction came from and let's go down that rabbit hole and then let's start talking about developing these men and women that are on the tour.
Sure. But my path was, like a lot of guys, it's a case of building a small qualitative network because I was working so much in MMA. I was MMA athletes are pretty broken guys, and they're going to see a lot of physiotherapists. The other type of athlete that sees physiotherapists an awful lot are golfers. So basically, via quality networking and building relationships over a period of time, eventually I was asked to if I wanted to get involved with European Tour golf. I was working with a few professionals prior to that, but a physio who happens to be the head or one part of the S&C that we have on tour, Dan Coughlin, basically asked me to come out and apply what I was doing in our small private gym and apply it on the tour.
Sensational. So now let's talk about it. Let's talk about how you look at these athletes to really get them started with first. And then let's talk about, since you're in your off season right now, what are these qualities and characteristics that we're looking to build to prep them so they're ready for what really is a long season.
Yeah. Yeah. So unfortunately, we don't live in an ideal world. So most of the time, when I meet the golfers, it's usually a very a bottom up approach. So they'll come in. We'll maybe do a consult. We'll maybe do because I should specify this that the service is free to the golfers. So they'll come in. They'll book a slot in with you on the days you're out on tour, and they'll come and see you either on the truck or in the gym that you're located in, and they'll come find you. And quite often, what they want can vary wildly. So you get some guys who want like a top to bottom. I want an S&C intervention, and we'll test them. We'll from that testing we'll figure out sort of what areas they're strong in, what areas they're weak in. Another time you might get a professional come in and say, I've got this workout to do. Can you kind of walk me through it and make sure I'm doing everything okay? And we're sort of actually coaching them lifts. And then other times you've got to get someone come in and they'll want some advice or something very simple, or they've already got an S&C coach back home and they kind of want you to see that they make sure they're doing everything right. So the variability is very bottoms up. Then what we do is some of the players we'll develop relationships with, and they'll actually come on board with the service as like a fully supported athlete or a partially supported athlete. And what we'll do is then work with them regularly, write them programs. They'll have contact times with the different S&C coaches we have spread across the service, and we'll basically look after them throughout the year and program for them accordingly. And where we are right now, for instance, is last event of the year's season. Season is just finished. Challenge Tour finished a little bit earlier. So me and my colleagues have been running a lot of off-season work. These guys live all over Europe. So, we have to write correspondence work for them, check in with them regularly, make sure everything's going okay, and work around those constraints, and then hopefully catch up with them again in the new year, maybe for some preseason testing when we kick off in Abu Dhabi and Dubai at the start of the year.
Awesome. So now when you're moving all around and you're going with these guys on tour, how then do you, because it's a challenge when you've got multiple people going in multiple directions, doing multiple things that are not necessarily all programmed in conjunction. So how do you
Yes.
get this to flow? How do you get this to move in a way so that you can still be basically like coaching and not just, herding cats?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's the service we keep the scope sort of limited. So we have right now we're busy, and it's actually kind of a good thing, but our capacity is kind of limited because there are only four S&C coaches who work as part of the service, and we're serving 150 odd players plus, and then players on the challenge tour. And because it's on a first come first serve basis, that obviously filters out some of the people that can come and see us. So because there's so many moving parts, we basically developed a system. Dan and Simon, two of the other guys, have developed a system where we basically traffic like the athletes. So the guys who want really deep interventions, the system is that they're green and they're traffic light in a certain way, so that they're the ones who want full-on interventions. Everything's kind of looked over, programming. They're coached every time they come in the gym, and then we, put guys on amber who want sort of moderate interventions, and then guys who want minimum interventions, and we try and organize them into how complex their intervention needs to be, and kind of limit the spaces so we're not completely overwhelmed. Again, the service is new, and we're looking to expand moving forwards because the service is only 2 years old. We've not been running it for very long on the European tour, so we're looking to grow it very gradually. It's good that we're busy. But we have to then, account for all these moving parts, because some of them will have private trainers as well. So we have to kind of maneuver around that. And we also try and work very closely with our physio team, who quite often will refer players to us when they flag issues. So that'll then be their first time they'll be coming to see us for an S&C intervention. So there's a lot of moving parts. And we try and sort of checklist athletes so that the ones who want those full-on interventions, we can see those guys as needed, and then sort of, prioritize athletes based on the need. For instance, if you've got a guy who's very, because this is golf we're talking about, a lot of the players aren't very, how can I put it, don't have high levels of physical literacy, let's put it that way. Very good at golf, but not very good at training. And the guys obviously need a lot of training, need to be taught to train. Some of these guys are people in their 20s and 30s. They'll be top priority because they're the ones who need active coaching. Whereas the guys who are obviously very gym savvy, we can kind of send them programs and kind of just keep a little bit of an eye on them because, again, our facilities are quite limited. On the truck, for instance, we don't have a lot of space. And sometimes, the gyms we have when we're on tour, particularly hotel gyms, stuff like that, again, we're limited for space and time. So we are trying to maneuver around all these issues and try and make sure the interventions are thorough enough and working well for them.
So when we're looking at these athletes, and I think physical literacy is a great way to define it. How then are you developing these programs, and how then are you looking to develop these people? Because I think that one thing, at least from what I see with a lot of coaches in America, is they don't really train them.
Yeah. Yeah. So they tend to, in golf, the tradition has been I like this phrase, the training the golfers have always done in the past has been kind of absurd and underloaded. And a lot of golfers have been ill-served, possibly. A lot of physiotherapy infused sort of methodologies, kind of divorced of that physiotherapy intent. So we see a lot of rehabilitative exercises used as like training exercises. And that's sort of in the past typically was what sort of, colored S&C in golf. And what we're learning now rapidly is that strength is an enormously underpinning factor in golf performance. And what I found personally is that I can get these guys a lot stronger than they ever thought they'd need to be. And their coaches perhaps thought they'd need to be. Because low body strength in particular, has a pretty strong correlate with club head speed. And we keep finding that we keep making them stronger, not always, but quite often the club head speed will keep improving. And when we get them in to test them, we big thing we test for is we keep it simple: isometric mid-thigh pull, counter movement jump impulse, and then we look at their club head speed and ball speed. And then from that, we can figure out the relationship between those things. So, if someone's usually club head speed will tack pretty closely with their strength levels. There's been a study done on challenge tour players showing exactly that. So if someone's super, super strong, but it isn't really showing up in their club head speed, we know there's a transfer issue perhaps occurring there. On the other hand, if someone's got a low club head speed and their mid thigh pull isn't very good, we know well probably strength's something that then needs to be addressed. So that's a very very simple assessment. We don't go down the TPI route really with the type of testing they do, where it's looking at the golf movement very specifically, looking for weak links in the golf movement, and then trying to strengthen them. Thus far in golf, what I found is that the generalist approach thus far is reaping the most rewards because it's the lowest hanging fruit. So if we can keep getting them stronger, for now, we keep seeing club head speed, ball speed improvements, which are the two biggest areas of impact we can make as strength and conditioning coaches.
I love it because, like you were saying before, that if you can get that speed up, now you're hitting the ball further, and if you're hitting the ball further, you're taking strokes off your game.
Yeah, exactly. And I've had conversations with golfers about this, and they seem to think golf is one of the few sports where the sports movement, because it's, the swing is very, very heavily studied, top to bottom. You go to some courses and they'll have really impressive 3D, kinematic setups where they can monitor the swing and check for all sorts of nuances, and it's almost as if golf in a sense has been navel gazing so hard at the swing they've kind of forgotten all the general preparatory stuff that might help. And what's happening now, we're seeing a lot more emphasis on strength because again it's a low hanging fruit. The other outside factor is also body mass. We're seeing a lot of golfers now looking to gain a lot of body mass because it's a basic physics relationship. For instance, what's his name? Bryson DeChambeau, I think that's his name, the scientist, as he's known as a very technical, thoughtful golfer, has gained 25 pounds this off season and has seen, I think, something along the lines of a 12-mile-per-hour club head speed. Don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. But that's a massive improvement just from getting bigger.
And that's huge to help him move forward with that.
Yeah. So again, you're taking distant, you're hitting the ball further, you're taking less shots. It's not a particularly difficult relationship, but I've still had conversations with guys now where the long-standing myths we'd had in martial arts, for instance, about being big affecting your ability to perform the technical elements properly, the idea that being strong will somehow inhibit your technical characteristics, and we're pretty rapidly shining light on that and the fact that that's just not true. And it seems that getting bigger and stronger are two things that are both helping golfers. And again, it's low-hanging fruit. Most other S&C guys would be like, well, of course, we've known that in other sports for years, but in golf, it's been a very slow realization to get to that point.
Now, how do you work with communicating that? Because I think that is probably the hardest thing to do, right? Is to get someone. I mean, golf is not a new game. So to get someone to kind of have a cultural change like that nature is a challenge in and of itself.
Yeah, it's the getting the culture to shift has been a big thing, but the coaches themselves have a lot of long-standing beliefs. Changing that slowly. We are working on our education as part of what the ETPI does is educational work, and we're trying to figure out our messaging. And the messaging may have to be different for coaches, for golfers, for general public, and also for people who, sports punditry in golf as well still looks down on strength training, for instance. They'll quite often criticize players for their strength training routines, particularly if someone gets injured. It's always one of the first things that gets blamed. And we're working on that messaging to the players because, we have within the service, we can message out to players and we're looking at different ways. And it may range from putting out science, for instance, that we are trying to do. But the thing is, the players and the coaches quite often aren't going to read that stuff. So it might have to be something simple as using information on the internet, memes, whatever we need to do to get the message through to players. And for instance, a lot of the players follow me on Instagram, and I'll put something up that'll grab interest and they'll ask questions. I quite often direct them to other useful sources of information, especially a lot of the younger players, particularly the challenge tour guys. Social media is massive with them. So if that's a way we can message through to them, there are guys putting out great infographics, stuff like that. Even if it's just bite-sized bits of information and it grabs players' attention enough to get them to inquire, that's making a difference.
Meet them where they're at, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So then let's talk about then the training process. So, when you're building these programs, not just in tour, but out of season as well, like, let's talk about how you're looking at this. Let's talk about, because you talked about looking at these evaluations and what you're trying to build. Well, now let's talk about the hows of how you're building it.
Yeah. So um, we've actually discussed this as part of the service, but then there's also what I do in my private practice, and that diverges a little bit with the stuff we do with the ETPI. I always aim to keep it very, very simple. So the routines we use, the off-season training we use is always very simplistic. A lot of the guys are pretty undertrained, so very, very simple lifting routines suffice most of the time. So we're talking, sort of bottom of the barrel S&C stuff. So simple things like getting them doing sets of 3 to 5 for strength, just making sure they're consistent, all that type of stuff. And that's a big thing, is just keeping them consistent, keeping the strength work very, very simple. I like using a lot of Dan John's very, very basic principles, rules of 15, rules of 25 for strength. That stuff's very easily communicable. It's not too, sciencey sounding. It doesn't throw them off. And that stuff seems to work pretty well and we're looking simply at, I like to saturate and separate, whatever heuristic, if you want to call it that, where we'll focus on intensification of strength for a little while, and then get them moving and keep looking at even linear, type of periodization, where it's just putting more weight on the bar week on week, very, very simple, nothing too complicated. A few guys have tried to integrate a little bit of the yeses type stuff. But they get twitchy. They don't like the idea of doing maybe one exercise. So again, if I can't sell that to them, they aren't going to do it. So, we do keep it very simple. However, if you then go take a look at my Instagram, the story is very different. I'm trying out a lot of novel methods with some of the guys I work with privately one-to-one. So there's a particular handful of guys that we've been trying out triphasic methods, which I'm pretty well known for using. I think, for instance, Keir Wenham Flat has had me talk about that before, and I use a lot of the triphasic methodology with them, even to the point where some of the stronger guys, one of my strongest guys, for instance, we use super maximal methods with him, and that turns a lot of heads. A lot of people, well, what are you doing that with a golfer for? But that guy happens to have the highest club head speed on the Euro Pro Tour, 136 miles per hour. If it keeps getting better, he could probably end up doing long drive or something. And it just stands to reason that we took someone like that, whose club head speed was in the 120s, and then took it up to the 130s, through just making him as strong as possible, getting away from perhaps barbell convention. So, using hand supported methods, stuff like that, and just seeing how much we can improve his force producing characteristics. And we're currently running another off season using similar methods. And I think with a little bit of work, we could probably get him to 140 plus club head speed. And it's just seeing how deep that well of general strength goes for golfers, and I think we're gonna be surprised as to how strong they can get and still see performance improvements. And we're trying out different things and just seeing where it goes.
I love that you said that, because right now there's like kind of an ebb and flow back to the question of how strong is strong enough when it comes to speed. Do you think
Yeah.
that we're going to find that plateau when it comes to building club head speed?
Yeah, then that's kind of what I'm looking for. And for some golfers, they'll reach the ceiling sooner. So things like separation matter too. But quite often we find is that as they get stronger, they don't have to achieve as much separation between their shoulders and hips, because they're stronger. They can generate more force with less movement. There's quite a few good breakdowns where younger golfers who are using a lot of separation between their shoulders and hips, which does increase risk of injury to the back, which is a massive concern in golf. So if you can get them stronger, they require less separation, and they're still going to be hitting it for high club head speeds. And basically, the rule of thumb we use is this right now. If we're trying to improve if their strength is improving, but their club head speed isn't changing, we probably hit a bit of a ceiling. And that's the simplest way to assess those things. There's a fellow who I've interacted with somewhat, Alex Ellert. I might pronounce his name wrong, and he talks a lot about this. So basically, just see linearly see how strong you can get. If club head speed isn't shifting, then you've probably gone to a point where there's diminishing returns. Either there needs to be maybe a technical change. We need to work on separation, mobility. There's something else there, perhaps that needs to be worked on if you want to keep seeing club head speed improve. But we also know there's a happy average. We have statistics, we have the numbers for the players, so we know that, for instance, 120 plus club head speed is pretty much tour average speed, and we know that ball speed, for instance, there's some good infographics showing that ball speed kind of tops out, that the players with a certain level of ball speed are the ones earning the most money recently. So we know that there's a kind of a point there where there may be a diminishing returns. But again, because there's so little information and it's something right now we're just trying to figure out, we're trying to see, and it may be somewhat idiosyncratic. Some guys might hit it further. For instance, there's a good example is that long drive, which has now become increasingly popular. Those guys are super strong, super jacked, really big, really tall, and they'll have club head speeds that are insane, 150, 160 plus, but that's all they're good at. So you've got to taking a example from a specialist, someone who is very, very good at generating club head speed. But obviously, for them, they're not playing. They're obviously doing long drive because perhaps not as good at the short game. And that's maybe the key thing there, is that we can take a lot of cues from those guys and take a look at what the long drive guys are doing. But then if you can get someone who can kind of put the ball where he wants it, which is something the long drive guys don't have to do, they're just trying to hit it as far as they can. And there is a point of diminishing returns, but it's just finding out where that is.
So then when you do see that, what are some alterations that you look to make to the programming?
So yeah, basically what we'll do is we stop seeing that. What the next thing to look at is jumping. We know that jumping, there's some great pictures of Tiger Woods jumping in the air to look at a lie. It's one of my favorite pictures, and this guy must have an enormous foot, like ridiculous foot. It's a great picture, and there's someone who probably inherently has a great vertical jump. And what we look to do is if we can improve their jumping. We also see shift in club head speed too. So it's that, riding that strength curve pretty much, like you're banging on the door of strength, not seeing any improvements. Well, let's look at the jump impulse characteristics. How quickly are they producing that force? And we know that there's good correlate between the ability to produce power in the jump and club head speed again. So then you can look at working your way along, looking at club head speed and then how it relates to jumping. So I've employed quite a lot of extensive jumping in some guys' programs just to see how they get on with that stuff. And quite often, again, we'll start seeing shifting in club head speed. But then again, same point is that obviously we're in season. I'd hate the word maintenance. I don't like it, but we're looking towards trying to keep club head speeds constant. What I'll generally see throughout the course of a season, for instance, in one of the few guys that I've tracked very closely, we've seen them A, lose weight over the season, and B, drop in club head speed over the season. Just maybe due to a number of factors: the travel, the lifestyle, the stress, everything, all those extenuating circumstances that cause them to bleed club head speed over the season. So it's then looking at trying to raise that or keep that at a decent level throughout the course of the season. So that's a factor as well we have to include.
I love that, man. Because I think that, all too often people look at the general to specific continuum and they don't fill the bucket completely like you're talking about. And then they kind of skip or combine that jump throw area, if you may, with that just general basic strength training, as opposed to building, utilizing, and then progressing.
Yeah. Like I said, the golf coaches, they've got the specific elements of golf practice very much figured out. I can't add to that. Those guys have it down, and they know exactly how to tweak their practice in order to get more out of themselves technically. Then they can flag things like mobility issues, stuff like that, where we can usually find, if we can give them more space within certain movements, they'll be able to eke more out. But yeah, it's because again general preparatory approach to golf has been, you know, inadequate in the past, let's say, it's low hanging fruit. So we can still, eke a lot out from just general preparatory approaches. And I do definitely think we do live in a world where specific preparatory approaches are becoming increasingly trendy. And if you've got running athletes, this makes sense. But these guys are again trying to produce a lot of force and power from a a fixed position. The mechanics, everything involved, it's all a little bit different. So there's definitely a wellspring there of more general preparatory training that these guys can get before they then look to add specific stuff. And some of the specific stuff is super interesting as well. We start looking to then progress them to things like throwing, stuff like that. We can look to include things like speed sticks, which allow them to do overspeed swinging with golf, with golf club like implements, and those also potentially have a benefit as well.
I love it, man. Now, William, where can people find out more about your programming and what you're doing, and how they can learn from you, and how you can help their athletes when it comes to the development of their golfers?
Sure, the best place is probably Instagram right now. I'm probably the most active on there, and I'm always open to DMs as well. So I'll put a lot of stuff out on there. My own website as well, which is www.powering-through.com. I've also written a lot of articles for Simply Faster as well. Carl Valley is very keen on my content there, and I put stuff out semi-regularly there. So there's a bulk of content there to be read through. And then I've done a few bits for Fight Camp Conditioning and a few other places.
Fantastic, brother. We'll make sure we got those ats and the URLs and the notes. William, always great to catch up, man. Truly appreciate your time. This is sensational stuff.
Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, man. Really appreciate it. We'll be in touch real soon, brother.
Take care, mate.
Yeah, man. And a huge thanks to William Wayland for spending the time with us today. Guys, just some open, honest, candid sharing from a man really paving the way and building the road in Europe and in the Middle East with these pro golfers, to work with them, to help lay the foundation for other coaches to be able to come in and continue to work upon the culture shift that he's leading from the front, and all the work they're doing to build these guys and evaluate and continue to develop these relationships and educate them as players is only going to help coaches in the future. So, William, I can't thank you enough for all your open, honest, candid sharing today, and all the great work you're doing, paving this road for coaches, so that they'll be able to be involved with this more in the future, on top of just the great work that you're doing with these people to help them develop consistently to be more robust and better athletes. And guys, make sure that you give them a follow on Instagram. That's Powering Through, at POWERINGTHROUGH. And check them out at www.powering-through.com. That's POWERING-THROUGH.com. Putting out awesome stuff. His stuff on the gram is sensational, so make sure you give him a follow. Make sure you give him a follow if you haven't already. And as always, guys, if you did enjoy the talk, please share it through the social media outlet of your choice, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it may be. As always, we're just trying to get the best information out there to all the great coaches that we can. And as always, guys, thank you for everything that you do for us here at Central Virginia Sport Performance. We will be back next week with another awesome guest. We will see you then.